Hello, this is my tutorial on how to use loops. I'm going to be teaching how to use for loops, how to use while loops, and how to use do while loops. I'm going to go over a very basic syntax, and if you want to learn more, reapply it and, watch this video a couple times. If you're seeing this, you are in contact with me, and I wish you the best of luck in dealing with me further, because I know how to code, but I don't know how to talk to people. So, let's have some fun. The first for loop is going to be super simple. Here's the syntax. Now, it needs three parameters. The first one is what I call the counter. Typically, everybody uses I on their first iteration, their first variable, and this is what it looks like. You're setting it equal to an initial value. This comes into play with how many times the for loop runs, with this next part, the condition. And this says, okay, as long as I is less than 10, then we're going to run the code inside of this. But I isn't ever changing in here, so how do we do that? And that's where this comes into play. What I call the iteration. Here's how the flow of a for loop runs. It says, okay, here is I. Is I less than 10? It is, cool. Run this code, and then iterate by whatever you specify up here. This can be plus equals 2. This can be plus equals 3. This can be times equals 2, times equals 3, minus, it can decrement. In which case, you then have to reapply, where I or your variable starts at, or in what your condition is going to be. Because the second this is false, it won't run. Here is an issue. If you have a condition, like let's say, I don't know, I does not, as long as I does not equal 10. If we said I plus equals 3, this right here is an infinite loop. Infinite loops are dangerous because it runs as fast as your computer can and will eventually take up so much memory that your computer will crash, or your CPU will turn into a fire hose, in which case you will have a jet as a new computer, unless you want to get a whole new computer too. That works either way. The reason this is infinite is because it says, okay, I equals 0. It's not equal to 10, add 3. Second pass, I equals 3. Less than 10, add 3. Now it's 6. Less than 10, add 3. 9, not equal to 10, is nope. Add 3, and now it's 12. It doesn't surpass that value of 10 and will continue forever. In a matter of 2.5 seconds, by just adding 3 each time, I got to 14,900, I think 14,993. That was a very big number, and it scared me. I feared for my computer's life and my own, because all of my important code files are on here. And so that's how you would typically create an infinite loop. For how a loop typically works, just to show you that I'm not some crazy teenager teaching you how to do this. If we go back to this, I adds 1 each time. We're going to use the hardest method ever to print out your variables. This is the most advanced syntax you will ever see in your life. This next part is how you compile a Java file in your IDE. If you don't know how to do this or have never done it before, don't stress about it too much. You'll figure it out when you actually have to do it. It's not very hard. This just compiles the file you're referencing, and this runs it. Would you look at that? It runs 10 times, and it follows the same flow. The first time, I equals 0. Okay, is I less than 10? Yup, print it. Add 1. Okay, 1 less than 10? Print this, run it. The final one where 9 says, okay, I equals 9. Print that and increment. I is equal to 10. Is 10 less than 10? No, it's not. If you don't know how to do that, give me your math teacher's name and I will talk to them on a very professional note, and also talk to the gods of math, because they will tell you a lot of things in a very nice language. And again, this is how a for loop works. You can also nest a for loop, but I recommend you be careful with this, especially when you're learning how to use them, typically because here's a few things. The same thing where, whoopsies, can't have you just yet. It's the same thing as scope. You can't have two of the same variable. This I variable is scoped for everything inside this for loop. It can be used in this for loop, but here's a danger, is that you can't use A in this for loop at all unless you reassign it to a higher level object or an integer, as long as you're reassigning it somewhere. It's the same deal with I. And here's the other trick, is that if you have a nested for loop, this can evaluate to true forever. This can be an infinite loop. So it will cause this loop to run forever, and this outside loop will never actually increment. That's another infinite loop. Your computer will turn into a jet. You will be able to leave the atmosphere, and you will have a hole in your wall because your computer gets that hot. That actually won't happen. Your computer should be okay unless you're running on a Chromebook, in which case, get off your school Wi-Fi. I know you're there. That's the idea of a for loop. The big overlying theme on how to use a for loop is you want to run this a set number of times, and it's changing by a set amount. The next part is a while loop. You're going to recognize this syntax in a half second. Wow, that almost looks like an if statement. Well, you're right, but this one can hurt your computer pretty badly. The syntax is the same as an if statement. While, your condition, and then your code. Never put true here. Never, 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 never actually put true here, because this will run forever, and you will cry because your brand new $20,000 gaming computer, because you don't know how to stop a program, will now turn into a fireplace and or molten lava, whatever comes first. I think it's fireplace, then lava. That's how chemistry works. And never put true there. It'll run forever until you terminate the program. You should have enough time, but if you don't, you probably walked away while compiling your code. Never do that. So, if we declare an integer, while a is less than 29, yeah, we're going to go with 20. We're going to, advanced printing mechanism here. And you're probably thinking, oh, you could just do this with a for loop. Well, you damn right could. But for the sake of learning how to use a while, I'm just going to do it like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to super cool recompile my code and run it. And would you look at that? It's the same idea, but here's the trick, is that if this condition evaluates to false initially, compile, it never runs. Why is that? It's like your if statement. It's like if you're saying if a is less than 20, then you run this. But the thing is, there is no fallback for a while loop. It's just whatever comes next. So in this case, your loop will never run. But in the which case, it's less than 20, it meets that condition, it will run. If your condition always evaluates to true, or you never increase or change your value as expected, that's an infinite loop. You're going to suffer, it's going to hurt, and you're going to cry. Typically, I use while loops for many things where a user input is necessary. So for example, if you had a method which had a while loop, and it said, okay, while the user hasn't provided their name, we're going to keep asking them. And here's how the control flow would look. Do you want to tell us your name? No. Do you want to tell us who you killed? No. Do you want to tell us your name? Nope. And this repeats about 400 times, and by this, you're both dehydrated, you're both suffering. Do you want to tell us your name? Yes, I do. And that is when, okay, now we have his name, we can go arrest the mother. That's when you say, okay, this loop is done. It's usually used for a more randomized input, something where a condition may not be running a set number of times. But the solution to not having a fallback is the do while loop. The syntax is pretty similar. Look, I guarantee that you'll figure this out in a second. Ka-chow. You now have yourself a do while loop, and I'm going to run this. My super advanced printing mechanism. Now here's what's different with a do while loop. It says do this at least once, then evaluate the while. So in this case, it's going to print a once. It's going to realize, oh shit, 21 isn't less than 20. Stop running. And if we look at that, look, I'm not crazy. It prints out the value of a. So it runs this code at least once. And if you don't believe me, we're going to say less. If we're going to say I is greater than 21 and a is less than 100, system.out, I'll print line a, and we're going to say a++, and hopefully this doesn't break my computer. If this is an infinite loop, you're going to see your first infinite loop. Look at that. Look at that. Look how smart that is. It runs 21 because it's like, okay, do this once. Is that greater than 21 if I add 1? It's 22. Is it less than 100? Yup, run it. And this just keeps going. And that's the do while loop, is it gives you a fallback even when you don't have the initial condition as being true. If you do have a do while loop and your initial condition is true and you have 4,000 lines of code and you've absolutely no clue how that line's false, go take a nap. Figure out where you put that boolean, where you put that variable, and then come back and then realize you have no clue where that variable is. Anyway, that's the basics of a for loop, of a while loop, of a do while loop, and they all have their different applications. For loops run a definite amount of times as long as you properly evaluate your conditions. A while loop is like a loop it's just an if it's an if statement that runs as long as the condition is true. That can be an infinite loop a lot more times than you expect it. Be careful with while loops. And do while loop is pretty much curing your stupidity by saying, okay, this runs once, and if it runs once and you didn't expect it to run once only, well, you messed something up. Anyway, this is my video on loops. If you're here, you unfortunately know how to contact me. If you need help, send me a message. I'll gladly help you out because I know this stuff and I like watching other people learn how to do this stuff. I hope this was informative. If you learned how to use loops, congratulate yourself. Go get a glass of water and continue on with your day. Anyway, enjoy learning how to use loops. AJ signing off.